Thank you, Jessica. Good evening, everyone. My name is Crystal Fox, and I'm a Senior Policy and Program Analyst in our ESPQ department. So thank you for joining us this evening. And our presenter tonight is Mr. Jason Fletcher. Mr. Fletcher is from Delaware, and he is a member of our Delaware Education Association. Jason has served as a paraeducator for 11 years in specialized and middle school settings within the Colonial School District in Newcastle, Delaware. In 2021, he was honored as Colonial's Education Support Staff of the Year, and he has been a district CPI trainer since 2020. Jason has expertise in utilizing training techniques, and he also works with students in helping them develop coping skills to reduce the need for behavior support interventions. And so we're very excited to have him here with us this evening to discuss his philosophy and share strategies with us on how to foster safe and structured environments that include high expectations for students around student behavior and academics through the use of verbal interventions. So welcome tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful presenter tonight, Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Crystal, for such a warm and inviting welcoming. And also, Jessica, thank you. This webinar was created to provide some of the strategies that I use when I'm verbally de-escalating students. So let's get started. So we're going to look at our objectives. So the objectives for this evening will be as follows. We're going to use an effective and safe option to de-escalate behaviors is the use of positive verbal interventions. Positive verbal interventions can prevent or reduce the likelihood of an intense behavior from escalating. These interventions can be used in the classroom, on the bus, in the hallway, the cafeteria, or any place where students are present. So tonight we'll be looking at understanding the difference between behavior management and behavior interventions. Knowing the difference between these two will help you understand how to support the student to meet the expectations. We're also going to discuss how to appropriately respond to a variety of challenging behaviors. We're going to review verbal de-escalation strategies to support students who are demonstrating challenging behaviors. And we're going to help you create a calm and supportive learning environment. This is especially important in creating a safe learning space for students. And then lastly, we're going to introduce the behavior cycle. This is the cycle of the behaviors often presented by students from the beginning of the behavior to the end. Next slide, please. Understanding behavior management. Let's talk about understanding behavior management and how it is different from behavior interventions. In a school setting, behavior management are rules, expectations, and norms of the facility, while interventions are the supports to help the students meet the expectation and norms. So let's give some examples of behavior management systems. Your student code of conduct, school expectations, and classroom norms. I know that in my school, each student is handed out a code of conduct at the beginning of the year, and they're sent home to their parent so the parents can review what are the expectations of the school, of the student while they're in school. The parent then signs it and then returns it back to the school in a form of acknowledgement. Now, not only does it tell you the expectations of the rules, but it also lists the consequences of if you break the rules. These systems are often printed and clearly defined in your school setting, also known as the rules. Let me give you two examples of an expectation and an intervention. In an elementary school, a teacher's expectation of her class is that they maintain a straight line as they transition through the hallway. That is the expectation. The intervention used to support the student could be verbal reminders, or how about a taped straight line to help them maintain the expectation. These are the supports to help the students remember and follow the expectation. The second example will be, in my school, the rule is that no cell phones are to be visible during any part of the school day. If a staff member sees a student's cell phone, the staff member must take it out of the student's possession. If a student refuses to give up their phone, then the staff must call an administrator. So that is the expectation. The intervention we use to help the kids support or to help support our students is that every student was given a yonder pouch at the beginning of the year. A yonder pouch is a secure bag that is used to store a mobile device. It has a magnetic lock that can only be opened by a special device. Though the students are not required to use the yonder pouch, the students can voluntarily put their cell phone in the pouch so they will not be tempted to bring it out. When a student voluntarily places the phone in the pouch, that is an example of an independent behavior management. This is the goal for students to manage their behaviors independently. As staff members, we provide the support to the students, and we hope that they will use them independently. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about behavior interventions. Interventions can come in many forms. They can be tangible, they can be intangible. We're going to discuss modeling behavior, picture reminders, positive reinforcements, calm and positively phrased language. When we talk about modeling expectations, this is when you take time to show your students the desired behavior in their setting, such as practice walking in a straight line, or showing a student how to stand or walk on the right side of the hallway, where literally the adult is modeling, the student is watching it, he is supposed to follow the example that the teacher has given them. They're modeling. The next one is the picture reminders. These are great for nonverbal or pre-readers. They are photo reminders of the expected behavior. They are often used in an elementary setting, but the universal sign works for any age group. Positive reinforcers. Positive reinforcers have a dual purpose. They award the students who are showing the desired behavior, and it is a reminder to the students observing what is expected. Food and candy are often used, but verbal praise and stickers are just as effective. A calm and positive language. Ensure that you're keeping a low and positive tone. Make students feel secure. Think about the behavior interventions in your workspace that you utilize to support your students. Next slide, please. So the intervention we are going to talk about is verbal de-escalation, an intervention used to de-escalate a challenging situation from becoming worse. Verbal de-escalation is about what you say and also how you say it. Verbal communication should be short, simple, and clear. Always consider students' cognitive ability. Not every student can process information the same. So it is extremely important to talk in a short, clear, and simple language for everyone easy to understand. But too many voices talking at a time can frustrate, even confuse, or escalate a student's behavior. You always want to ensure the students understand the request made by the presenter. Here are some communication tips to consider. Try using repetitive languages. You might say, come take a break with me, and then repeat it. Come take a break with me, just to ensure that the student is getting the language or getting the message that you're presenting. Always remain respectful and positive. Use positively phrased requests instead of saying, use positively phrased requests. So you see a kid running down the hallway, instead of saying, stop running, you'll say, walking feet, please. Kids won't be more so defensive if you're yelling at them, and because they recognize the tone that you're given, so they will respond in a more appropriate way than more of a defensive way. Remember, 70% of communication is nonverbal. Your body language is a form of communication also. You must be aware of the communication that you're sending to the students in distress, meaning your body cannot say one thing and your mouth say another thing. So if you have an aggressive demeanor on you, but you're speaking in a soft tone, that will bring confusion amongst their kids. So make sure your language, your body language, and your verbal language are on one accord. Ensure that you're maintaining a non-threatening posture with a relaxed and calm body. Also, maintaining personal space and proximity is important to the student also. You do not have to be in a student space for them to feel as though you're listening. You can listen with empathy at a distance and still respond in a calm voice. When you give students personal space, it shows them that you respect their space and you respect their emotions. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a time when you may need to be close to a student for immediate support. Also, sometimes a reassuring touch on the shoulder is just what a student needs to de-escalate. Remember that you are a professional. When students become distressed, you cannot control their behavior, but you can control your behavior and your attitudes towards the student. So it is very important that you are regulated before you attempt to de-escalate any type of intense behaviors. Next slide, please. Okay, creating class culture of compliance. Behavior prevention strategies should be incorporated into your workspace. Let's start by discussing how effective check-ins can be. Check-ins are relationships formed through a trusted adult taking an active interest in a student who demonstrates challenging behaviors. They should be done regularly throughout the day. Having a personal check-in with a student that are just between the check-in is just between the student and the preferred staff member. And when you have that connection, it deepens the personal relationship, but allows for student privacy. For example, I have a colleague and she does a great job of checking in and observing her students' behaviors. She's a para also, so in some ways she may see things that the teachers don't see. When she's walking around observing her students, asking them with help, she's able to make that one-on-one personal connection with them. And she gave me a strategies that I would like to share with you to help, as a strategy so that I could help you. So she walks around, if she sees a kid who's showing a little bit of anxiety or agitation, she will just walk up to them and she will put up her 3 fingers And this is already established that one means everything is okay. Two means something or someone made me upset and the work, or it could mean the work is too challenging, now I'm frustrated. Or the third one means I need a break right now. Because she does her check-ins regularly and establishes her rapport with the students, she uses this nonverbal intervention to communicate with her kids to meet their needs. And whatever the kid needs, whatever the kid responds to, according to the student's feedback, this response should be predetermined, if possible, with the student and staff member, meaning she's going to meet that student's need wherever they're at. If they just need a little extra, a back rub or a little help with their seat work, she's going to do it. But a conversation wasn't had. Her check-ins and her relationships with that student to use the three-finger system made it possible for that student to feel better or provide the support that they needed. Social emotional learning. If you do not have SEL time, lessons, or curriculum built social emotional learning into your day, you will need to find time to model it for students. So now I'm going to speak to our other supports like the transportation team. Trans I've like in my role, I meet the kids off the bus as soon as they come, for school, and I make sure that they get on a bus to leave from school. And I noticed that one of our bus drivers has a really good, positive rapport with his students. Even though he's not in classroom, but he is teaching affirmations. He is teaching them affirmations when they get on the bus and when they get off the bus. Each student that gets on his bus, he gives a fist bump and makes sure he tells them to have a good day. Each student, when they get off the bus, he does the same thing, and each student complies, smiles, and are happy that they rode his bus. He provided affirmations just from a fist bump, and I've also seen him share his perception or perspective on situations when the kids were having bad days. He gave them advice, he cheered them up, he did whatever he can do to accommodate and support the students to help them, to encourage them throughout the day or throughout his short period of time while they're on the bus. So that's telling me that anyone can teach SEL, whether you're a cafeteria worker, whether you're a para, whether you are a transportation, you're a bus driver. Next slide, please. Now, let's go over some behavior vocabulary. Regulation. It means the ability to manage your emotions and control your behavior. When you are regulated, you have control over your emotions, which could lead to you making positive responses. Positive responses to behaviors increase the likelihood of a successful intervention. Escalating behaviors is a term that describes when someone becomes increasingly agitated, angry, or violent in a situation. Triggers are antecedents to the escalating behavior. Events representing certain situations, people, interactions, and/or directives and/or requests can provoke the agitation and potentially lead to more high-intensity behaviors. Positively phrased. Choosing words that are affirmative and empowering. Positive language does not mean avoiding difficult topics or pretending things are fine when they aren't. It means acknowledging a challenge while still choosing language that gives reassurance and expresses support. Do you have any examples of positive phrases? So I'll give you some. You should say, you might want to do that, but I would prefer if you did X, Y, Z. That is a positive phrase. Or if you were to try to XYZ, then perhaps XYZ. Perhaps I could suggest that XYZ, and it looks like there's a problem today with XYZ. You always want to use positive language when confronting students or when trying to verbally de-escalate behavior. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk about the behavior escalation cycle. What is the behavior escalation cycle? The behavior escalation cycle identifies stages of behaviors and how it escalates from start to finish. The behavior escalation cycle seeks to explain how student behaviors escalate and operates from beginning to end. Understanding the behavior escalation cycle assists educators to employ techniques for use at each stage. Some students have difficulty recognizing events that trigger their challenging behaviors and therefore have a limited ability to prevent their behavior from escalating. As educators, we may be able to recognize the behavior on the escalation cycle and respond appropriately to the challenging behavior. How we as educators intervene is different at each of these phases. We will be referencing this cycle throughout the presentation. This is not the only behavior model, but for purpose of the webinar, this is what we will use. Now let's take a moment and think of a time when you remember a student working through a difficult situation. As we're going through this cycle, try and identify the behaviors that the student was displaying throughout the different phases. Next slide, please. The first two phases of the cycle are calm and trigger. In the calm phase, student behavior is characterized as goal-directed, compliant, cooperative, and academically engaged. The student is responsive to teacher praise and willing to cooperate with peers. These are the perfect opportunities for teaching social emotional learning, modeling appropriate behaviors, and introducing new interventions to the students. When a student moves to the second phase, this is the phase where students' positive behaviors changes in response to an event, and that's called the trigger. This behavior can be triggered by a negative interaction with a peer, change in schedule, or confusion about an assignment. Do not dismiss outside factors such as lack of sleep, stressors in the home, negative interactions with parents. Student behavior in a trigger phase may look like frustration, anxiousness, restlessness, fidgeting, and pacing around. Think back to the student that I reminded you of earlier. Can you identify the trigger? Now that you identify the trigger, let's discuss the appropriate response to the behavior. Next slide, please. So let's take a moment to think back to our prevention slide, creating a classroom culture. Those preventative measures happen during our calm phase. In a calm phase, we are teaching replacement behaviors and emotion regulation skills. We are also looking at SEL strategies such as relaxation, distraction, positive talk, mindfulness, self-soothing, curriculum-based options such as the zones of regulations and the incredible 5-point scale, they could also be used. When a student is triggered, we can use interventions appropriately to the trigger. When a student is triggered by a non-preferred activity or assignment, we want to remind him or her of the motivators. So I may say something like, hey, I just wanted to remind you that you are working 10 minutes on for your Chromebook. I'm gonna repeat what I just said. I may say, hey, I just wanted to remind you that you are working for 10 minutes on your Chromebook. Or I may say, once you have completed your assignment, then you will get your Chromebook. This method involves energizing the student's motivation to manage themselves, reminding them of incentive or treat. If the trigger is change in routine, then you want to prep the student as much as possible for a change. Let the student know you realize how hard it can be to change and to learn new things, or even get used to new things. You can give them a few examples of how you felt during changes in your younger years. And when they are ready to talk, listen with empathy. Here are two examples of things that you can say to show you are listening with empathy. Say, I feel the same way if that happened to me. You could also say, I want to understand what you're going through. You could also allow the student to move around the room, but be sure to spend a few seconds in a friendly manner near the student. Next slide, please. Agitation. The agitation phase is characterized by a series of behaviors that indicate the student has disengaged from instruction. Some students demonstrate agitation by increasing behaviors. Student behaviors may look like getting up out of their seat and wandering around the room, fidgeting, putting their head down, and not engaging in activities. Next slide, please. When it comes to agitation, we're always going to take a supportive approach. The agitation stage marks the point at which the student has escalated and the previous strategies are insufficient to avoid potential further escalation. The aim here is not to set a firm limits and enforce them, instead take a supportive approach. Appropriate staff responses: be supportive, show empathy, offer instructional choices, space and proximity, give them additional time to complete their assignments, and use positively phrased words. Here are a few verbal de-escalation strategies to behaviors shown in this phase. Outburst or making negative comments when really upset with an assignment. That is a behavior. So I may attempt to verbally de-escalate the student by saying, I notice you're really upset. Let's work together on breathing slowly for 1 minute in order to manage your impulses. Now, if the student complies with the request, then he completes the breathing exercise. Allow them to do something for themselves, such as taking a walk, or even tell you about what their plans are for the night or weekend. The next behavior. If you notice a student pacing, tapping his toes, hand wringing, and fidgeting, notice that can all be viewed as a form of stress relief. The behavior can be seen, this behavior can be seen in a student when they are feeling really, really anxious. My verbal de-escalation interventions. So if a student gets frustrated or anxious or nervous, and it has to do with an assignment or schoolwork, I may say to him, "Hey, would you like some support with your assignment?" And I'm using that simple, clear, soft tone. Would you like some support with your assignment? I could also say, I know this can be frustrating. Grab a quick drink of water, and I can help you when you get back. If the behavior is because of the environment, allow the student to work in a different environment, a comfy chair or a quiet corner. You may say, "Hey, would you like to sit in the quiet zone? I think you will feel more comfortable over there." You could also say, "Come sit next to me. That way I can support you as needed." During these behaviors, adults may offer the student the opportunity to be removed from the source to help maintain compliance and avoid further escalation. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk about the acceleration phase. During the acceleration phase of the cycle, the student's behavior intensifies and is often directed to the authority figure. The action of the behavior may present as defensive, frustration, defiant behavior, unwilling or unable to communicate with the adult who may be attempting to support them. They question your authority, argue, and engage in confrontational interactions just to interfere with instruction. The staff approach is you're still going to maintain a supportive approach, but this time you're also going to be more directive. Next slide, please. Students in this phase, students in this phase continue to escalate their behaviors and are unable to communicate with the dog who may be attempting to support them. Their aim here is to set up places where the student can go in order to engage in calming activities and potentially use emotion regulation strategies before it was suggested. Now it is assisted. Staff approach. During this phase, adult behaviors may include using non-verbal empathy messages and do not engage in verbal explanations or reasoning or other interactions that will further escalate. Always avoid the power struggle. Provide choices in which complying with directions is more advantageous than not. Consider gesturing students towards a personalized spot in the room to calm down and an inviting, non-demanding manner. Remember, you can wait, step away, do not do or say anything that may make the situation even worse by explaining, demanding, warning, and other corrective procedures. The goal of the adult is to not push the student into the peak cycle. So here are some of the verbal de-escalation strategies that I use according to its behavior. I'm going to downplay the situation. Always give the student an alternative to their challenging behavior. That is the way I downplay the situation. For instance, when a student is banging on a desk, An immediate reaction shouldn't be to tell the student, stop. You should try this, meaning in a calm voice, I may say, how about banging on the desk with a pen or taking out a piece of paper to draw to keep your hands busy? I'm offering this, I'm not stopping the student from banging, but I'm offering him another alternative. I'm also trying to downplay the situation and not fall into the power struggle. Always try to suggest an acceptable alternative. When a student is intentionally interrupting, you may say, Jason, when you lower your voice, then I'll be able to address your concerns. I'm gonna say that one more time. Say, Jason, when you lower your voice, then I'll be able to address your concerns. Instead of saying, stop yelling at me, I'll talk to you when I am ready. When a student is refusing, give a choice and provide possible outcomes. I may tell the student to go for a walk, but the student declines the invitation. That's the behavior. You should say, if you come with me, then I can make sure you're settled in a more comfortable area. And you can tell me if I missed anything that happened, I like to always give the students a chance to tell their side of the story. Next slide, please. Now we are at the peak. At this point, the student has reached full escalation and there is potential for highly disruptive, dangerous, or destructive behavior. Students may physically assault others, hurt themselves, cry hysterically, or destroy property, any of which poses great risk to safety of the student, staff, and others if the situation is not addressed appropriately. It is imperative that staff have a protocol. Ensure that you are following your school protocol in peak situations. The student's behavior is clearly out of control. They're yelling at the teacher, hitting, destroying property, and may create an unsafe environment for your class in your classroom. The student's behavior may present as rage, screaming, destroying property, crying, and escalate to the point where they have hurt themselves or others. Next slide, please. During this phase, is it imperative that the adults continue to regulate their own behavior by using calm voice tones, decreasing the amount of words spoken, leaving space between words, and decreasing voice volume. Make sure the student does not feel that they're being overwhelmed by the adults and forced to do something. Focus on controlling staff behavior, demonstrating compassion and tolerance to the students. If there is a staff who is a trigger, please remove that staff so that it will increase the likelihood of the student starting to de-escalate. When necessary, intrusive short-term interventions, such as removing the other student from the classroom, contacting the school crisis and security team, calling the student's parents, may be necessary. Verbal de-escalation interventions. We're going to take a regular approach we're going to ensure that we ourselves are regulated. Dysregulated adults cannot regulate a student in crisis. Personally, I do not speak to the students when they're in the peak phase. I allow them to get their release out safely. Once immediate safety measures are in place, it may be best to wait out the behavior, allowing the student time to de-escalate naturally if it is safe to do so. I personally allow students to de-escalate naturally so that it can teach them a skill how to self-regulate. But if communication is essential, use brief, clear commands or visual aids. You might say, when you are ready to talk, just give me a signal. Make sure you always have a no judgment approach to the student in the situation. You want to listen attentively without judgment and demonstrate empathy by validating their feelings and offering reassurance. Next slide, please. Just to go over a few things that we talked about. Remember that positive relationships with students and clear expectations along with proper techniques are crucial to creating a strong community in your classroom and in your school. Interventions will support students in social and emotional settings and help negative behaviors from de-escalating. Oh, I'm sorry, and help negative behaviors from escalating. Positive relationships reduce the likelihood of behaviors escalating, and we want to ensure that we're responding appropriately to behaviors by ensuring you are regulated. Next slide, please. Once again, I just want to thank everyone for listening. This is my first time doing a webinar. I hope you gained a little bit of insight on verbal de-escalation strategies. And if you have any questions, you can email me or answer right now in the webinar. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jason. And I know this was only an hour long, and so it was a lot of information in a very short period of time, but we definitely wanted to give everyone a great foundation for the information. I'm going to turn it over to Jessica.
All right. Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you, Crystal. So we are entering our question and answer portion. If you remember at the beginning, we said we will have Q&A at the end. So we are officially in our question and answer portion. We do have a few questions that have come up. If you have more questions that you would like to be asked during this time, please use the Q&A feature and post those questions in the Q&A feature. We will go through them in the order in which they have been received. And as a reminder, if we cannot get through them as they come through, we will send a follow-up email. Or if there's something that comes up that we might need to do a little bit more research or follow up on, we will put that in a follow-up email as well. So I think that Crystal is going to go ahead and moderate the Q&A box. So I will pass it back to Crystal to do that.
Thank you, Jessica. We have a few questions. So one question we have for you, Jason, is, are there any examples that you can give that we can use for our high school students for verbal interventions?
That's a broad question. So I would have to know the behavior of what the high school student is displaying. So I would just need a little more feedback on what are they talking about particularly.
Or maybe some general tips for working with older students?
Okay. From a verbal de-escalation standpoint, I would say meet the student where they are. I think kids have a ability to recognize what is real and what is not, especially when it comes to people. So I'll just say share your perspectives with how their behavior is affecting others and how it makes you feel. And just, yeah, I would just pretty much have to know what behaviors specifically that they will want to know.
Thank
Or
you.
that they would target.
Okay. So another question that came up in the chat as well was, as a custodian, how can I affect student behavior?
Well, so everyone in my school knows the custodians by name, or most of them, should I say, because they make themselves present. Like you are providing, custodians are providing a vital service to the building. So I will make yourself present. I would definitely get involved with any activities that you're eligible for, that you have the time for, and just put yourself out there. Again, people respect our custodians in our school because they are cool. They're high-fiving students. They do their job well. And so they actually have a connection with some of our students in our lower programs, like as a form of vocational training. So like they help them kind of, gather trash up and take it to the dumpster. So, maybe you want to incorporate some sort of vocational training with something that you do. But yeah, just make yourself known, put yourself out there and, see people.
Thank you, Jason. Another question that came up in the Q&A was around, you mentioned that educators also need to attend to their own wellness while supporting students or their own self-regulation. Do you have any
Right.
suggestions for how educators can advocate for staff wellness and supports, or how can they regulate themselves?
I would tell you this. So during any type of distress situation and you're dealing with kids who are talking about your mama, your daddy, your kids, you know what I mean? It's just going hard, just making you feel being very disrespectful. One thing that I learned is that they're a child and I'm an adult. Yes, it hurts. It hurts. And I don't come to work for this, but I could also think that that could be a defense mechanism for them. Like maybe they're not taught, they were never taught how to properly handle that emotion when they're in that stress situation. So their first instinct is, negative and just lash whatever first things that come through their mind. So what I'm saying to is maybe the kid just doesn't know how to handle his emotions during that time of distress.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. How would you help to bring this type of training to a campus level, that may not, for people who may not get to see the need, but there is a need there? And so how would you suggest that you spread the level of intervention strategies so that everyone can kind of work better together? Do you have any suggestions for how maybe in your school division you spread trainings, or how you all do trainings across the division or get it to multiple levels of educators?
Well, we're fortunate to have, I believe she's the VP, Tamika Mays in our district and actually in our school, and she does a good job of spreading out informations and trainings to people in our district, and even amongst our colleagues, and also our president, I believe her name is Josette. She does a good job of just blasting out emails with trainings and opportunities for us to learn how to better support our students. So I would say kind of like look at like your NBA president, and even if the situation is in dire, definitely advocate for the resources you need to your principal, to the vice principal, and I mean, and like do some self-learning, self-teaching, and just advocate and use your resources. I know easier said than done, but you can be the first person to make that step. You know what I mean?
Right. Thank you, Jason. Um, so we have two more questions. Do you have any suggestions about the language that you should use with middle school students to redirect them, especially when a student like refuses their phone? So do you have any suggestions for issues with phone compliance?
Everyone has issues with phone compliance. I will say that. And I actually work in middle school. And that is my preferred population. What I know about middle schoolers, they have an ego and they have I would say like arrogance about themselves. You know, they're really feeling themselves. So, and you know, they kind of don't, in most cases, or in some cases, don't respect authority. I will just come to them in a very direct approach. It's just, you know, like the more direct you are and the more balanced you are with support, the more you're able to not bring a defensive behavior out there. So just be more directive. That's the only thing I can say.
Thank you. Just reinforcing.
Sure.
So also for our last question, what can a one-to-one monitor or teacher's aide do to help a student who has a meltdown in the classroom? Do you have any suggestions around meltdowns or maybe those peak behaviors?
Right. So what can a one-to-one, someone who's a parent who's a one-on-one with another student, how can they support another student who's having a meltdown?
Or maybe just support in general in the
Okay,
class?
so okay. All right. So if you're catered to a student, if you're a one-on-one, that doesn't mean that you're not kind of responsible for any of the other students' behaviors. So if a student is having a one-on-one, is having a meltdown, and a teacher is addressing and supporting, you could do kind of a crowd control, meaning you can check on other students and make sure that they're not being impacted by the student's meltdown. So you can just do check-ins with them, say, hey, don't worry. Hey, you know, Johnny's going through, you know, his emotions right now, you know, just kind of like smooth the crowd and not allow them to be triggered by the other kids' emotions if you're not going to engage with the student who is having a meltdown. So just take care of the other kids around so that they're not affected.
Thank you, Jason. That's a great tip. All right, and I think that concludes our Q&A. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica.
To request a general session-specific certificate of completion as a participant of recorded sessions, please send your request by emailing espqweb@nea.org. All requests must include the session title and the on-screen certificate of completion code. Session certificates will not be provided if your viewer code is not included in the email request. Note, due to limitations in our ability to track attendance after live sessions, requests for personalized certificates will only be provided for participants of live webinars whose attendance can be verified. The certificate received for viewing recorded sessions will be session specific, but will not include personalized names. On behalf of the Center for Professional Excellence and Student Learning's NEA ESP Quality Department, I would like to once again thank our presenter, Jason, for the informative discussion this evening, and thank you for your participation. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and good night from the NEA ESP Quality Department.